Good afternoon, all. So let's jump into the topic itself straight away. So today I'm going to introduce for mainly into the simulation world and how it can be beneficial for the medical industry. So in usually majorly the medical industry is changing in rapidly, right? So it's one of the most critical industry also where just yeah it's rapidly changing also. So these simulation techniques, simulation softwares are being they used with respect to automotive, aeronautical industries very much. It's fully flourished, and even high end industries like NASA, even for ISRO, these people use these techniques or simulation, you can say, in order to find, design, and optimize all their products in order to see before it's performing in the actual world how it will be, and um, thereby designing it more optimized way also. But in the medical field, yeah, it's a little bit of lagging at the present, but it's hugely increasing, and in respect with respect to the orthopedics and all other areas, you will come to see in different sessions in the coming days how simulation can be worked in all those areas. So coming into the most of the engineering simulation, what all can you be done, right? So most importantly, disruptive innovations, very sharp ideas coming up very quickly, and which is very important in this cutthroat industry also, because everybody wants a very fast result. Like COVID came last year, this year in the beginning, and everybody wants a vaccine as soon as it's possible, right? So there is a huge need of innovations in which you have to try out different things in order to bring different products to a market very fast. Then the second thing is a successful FDA approval. So the main important area where most of the medical industry people struggle is to get this FDA approval, because the ideas and products will be there in the mind of every medical industry people, but reaching that to the customer soon and with very less time, it's very difficult, right? It has to be approved by FDA, which has to make sure it is very safe enough to be performed in life, because it's a very critical, it's matter of life and death. And then other important thing is it gives a more insight for the designers and the surgeons, right? What I meant by that is, for example, if you take any a cardio surgeon, and if he is inserting a stent into the a blood vessel, and he want to see how the blood flow is varying, will that lead to any aneurysms? How can he design his stent so that the flow will be in a better way? So all those kind of things he can see in prior, and also for that specific person, um, he's able to visualize in different ways, so that his design, and he will be having a much more confident in order to perform his surgery. So if you see into the way that we have grown in the field of medical, uh, the most conventional way, like in vivo, which we do the surgery in the body itself, a patient, and see experiment and see how it's working. Is it so we have to do in person, which is very time consuming and very costly, and it's very critical also, right? So the second method is in vitro, which is basically you can also say in silica, where you do it in a petri dish or in test tubes, something like that, in the laboratory, where you make up a environment and do the test. Right here also there is a lot of difficulties, like you have to go for different experiments, tests, and the cost is also very high in this case also. And the third thing comes in silico, which means the silico chips or the computers, where you can actually virtually create your own environment or human environment. You can model the even human biological tissues, in different parts, and you can actually simulate in order to find what is happening when you are implanting any stent, implanting any ortho, or implanting any parts like implants, how it's reacting with the tissues, or how well the joint will be, how long it will last. The implants has to last for a lifetime, right? They usually the product says like 20 to 30 years, but if it say fails in 2 or 3 years, uh, it's a serious issue. So you can do all these kind of studies in order to understand the product in much better way. So what is actual motivation for going for this alternative solution, right? So these medical industry, healthcare people who makes these products, implants, why they should go for alternative solution, right? So main thing is, as I mentioned, innovation is the key for um, leading or being a successful company in the industry, right? So you need to have an effective innovation. Second thing is the long and costly clinical testings. It's very a time taking process, as you also know, like for how people are struggling to find this COVID vaccine. Similarly, every product what you bring into the market, before bringing into the market, you have to be 100% sure that it will work as mentioned, and it will be safe for every person. It's not for only single person, it should be safe for all the people also. And the third thing is regulatory authorities, that's basically FDA. They have to approve, and the approval procedure is also very time taking procedure. They mention different steps, but they also have a long roadmap in order to they have a long roadmap also, which defines you can go for simulation driven process in order to cut short your time taking process and make the process very fast. So basically you can the solution for all these things are like going for simulation. You can create your own virtual human laboratory that is making a human body tissues and doing a simulation in that. As I mentioned, in silico testing, which you don't need to a actual person in order to test, but by a simulation you can understand how the product is working inside a human body. So let's understand basically what is simulation. I mentioned different ways like how simulation can help, but let's understand how what is engineering simulation, right? So you can see here a person walking with a lot of sensors, basically collecting data at different points, right? So here in this case, he is keeping a hip joint implant, and he want to see will it work effectively, as it's mentioning, right? So we can take a scan and get the geometry of that particular person, right? The shape and length, the geometry wise, it will be different for different person. So you can take a scan and you can get an SL kind of format and convert to a geometry, which is a basically CAD geometry. And we can also design our own a product or implant and fix it into that geometry. The next step will be giving the material property, right? So each different people will be having different bone densities. My bone density will not be others, it will be independent. And not only that, the density is not constant throughout, it's varying in different locations. So you have to consider these things in order to understand the whole mechanism, how will it sustain, um, even if I am implanting this, how it's affecting the whole femur of this bone, because this is the largest bone, and there is a chance in order to have a breakage or a fracture happening in the bone also, right? Then you can also take the input data while you working, while you moving down stairs. You can have a data. Just you can have data where you work down a stairs to see how the forces are coming into these joints. And if you know these joints, implementing these joints into a simulation, and you can also see how it's affecting the whole body. or the body parts where you are modeled, how the stresses is coming in this femur point, or how the implant is working, which is a critical area of the implant, how long it will sustain. All those kind of data you can understand. So this is the a rough workflow usually being done for any kind of simulation. Coming into our earlier topic, where you should go for alternative method and how beneficial it is. So our first point was virtual human laboratory, making a simulation world and understanding our product. Right. So um, implanting some parts, and as I mentioned before, it's a staircase, person coming down a staircase. Similarly, you can create different environment, different activities of daily life, like going for gym, walking, playing, and can see how that body is reacting to the implant, and how much force or how much stress is being created, and you can model accordingly. So you have your patient's information, specific person's information. You inputting that part implant into the body, and you are able to find how it is working, or how it's reacting to the body. So the main challenges, in the earlier session also I mentioned what are the main challenges. So here we can model different kind of situations and see how it's happening. It's not only for a specific activity, different activity, because the person is not only doing one thing, right? Similarly, you can see what is the stresses and contact pressures, how long it will work, wear details, like when two body parts are contacting, the wear should be minimum, right? It should not have a very frictional effect. We'll come a little bit more in detail in these things when we discuss examples. Then second part is silico testing. So for example, if you see any stent insertion procedures, so when you designing a stent, basically you have to have a data of how it will be positioned inside a blood vessel, and the blood vessel will be different for different persons. So if you're suppose say taking 10,000 people, putting it in 10,000 people and see how it's working, it's very difficult and very time consuming process. Practically you can say it's very tedious process, right? So the easy way, or the fastest way, is inserting this stent in a simulation world. We can create different kind of blood vessels and see how the flow of blood is happening. Will is it causing reducing the aneurysm, or the flow is better in this case, or flow is causing the aneurysms? So all those kind of things you can study. You can change the design and just see what is the thickness. If I changing some thickness, how it is affecting. So in one workflow, you can be able to do multiple simulations, multiple people's data, right? So it's a single workflow, but trying out in different person, you're trying out in single workflow. So basically, it's very fast and very cheap also. Then the third process issue that we have mentioned is getting the approval from FDA, right? So basically, we also have different kinds of criteria like ISO. We have to successfully pass the ISO criteria, then only we can have a certification, right? So in some cases where the implants, as I mentioned earlier, the implants are usually made for 10 to 20 years, basically. But there are cases where the implants get failed before that, maybe after 4 or 5 years. This is majorly due to fatigue. Fatigue is nothing but like if you consider a steel ruler, and if you're bending it in one side, it doesn't break, right? But it bends. But if you're continuously bending in opposite direction, and then again to the same direction, finally it breaks. So repeated cycling load of, or repeatedly doing the same thing causes small micro cracks, and then leads to a crack, definitely. So this is called fatigue. So you have to have a test done for these fatigue analysis. This can be easily done in simulation. Um, to try out in a person and doing it for 20 years, or will it sustain for 10 years? It's practically impossible, right? So in order to do in very less time, you can study different fatigue tests and come up with a design. And it doesn't replace a whole testing procedure. You have to do a testing definitely, but you don't have to test every ideas you have. You don't have to test every prototype. You don't have to make every prototype. You can finalize on one final prototype and test it and pass it. And there are different pathways in order to get certified from FDA also, like testing it in animals, benchtop, in testing humans. And there is also computational roadmap definitely cleared by the FDA also. So they are mentioning that computational modeling and simulation, if done correctly, has the potential to accelerate the device approval. So basically, they are also mentioning the simulation way is the fastest way in order to find innovative products. Coming into different kind of models or different kind of areas where simulation is playing a major role, like stent, heart valve stent, then dental implants, um, blood pumps. So there are actually different kind of parts or different kind of devices which is being which we can actually test in simulation world before implementing or bringing the product into the market and see how efficient the product is. So coming into earlier stage as mentioned, so it actually increases or boosts the confidence of any healthcare companies, right? So if you are doing some all those kind of tests and if you are so confident, you can say you can have a warranty test, or you can say this product will definitely live for 10 to 20 years because you have the proof, right? It increases the confidence in every companies. Similarly, the computational test being done now is very less, but the roadmap is like it will increase. But we are not, simulation will never change or will completely remove the testing, as I mentioned earlier. But you can finalize your ideas, you can finalize your product very fast by only by removing all the prototypes. You don't have to make every prototype and test every prototype. You can test your ideas by simulating and finalizing on one prototype and testing it and getting it passed. And similarly, coming into FDA approval process also, the time consumption for bringing out any product is considerably less if you're going through the simulation pathway. Similarly, as the time is reduced, obviously the cost of this making this product is also getting reduced. So these are some of the industries that is being used ANSYS tool in order to fast forward and make sure the product is good enough for different medical fields. You can see some top companies, GM Health, Johnson and Johnson. So it's being developed. It's being used in different industries for some time, and it's growing really fast also. So coming into our today's topic, basically till now I explained in a general aspect how simulation is actually being used in the general way. But coming into our topic, orthopedic. So in different situations, majorly joints are the main critical area where we implant different implants, and it's very hard to analyze also because movement is coming into place, so that you have to see what is happening. But it is also very difficult to see what actually is really happening inside that, because there is a lot of complexities involved. For example, if you take any shoulder joint, in order to reduce the friction there is coming into synovial fluid. So how is the interaction between that fluid and the structure? So there is multiple things coming into these kind of joints, which makes to understand what the actual process is going um, uh, beneath this, right? But simulation also actually helps in order to understand these different mechanisms and in order to make different products also. So coming into implant sections, basically, as I mentioned earlier also, you need to have a proper geometry and proper material data, what we input, right? Input is very important, then only the accuracy will be more, basically. So you can get the data of density by scanning. Basically, by scanning, you will be able to get the density variations across the bone, as well as what is the density also. Density changes with the person to person, as well as throughout the bone also. So we can input these kind of variations inside ANSYS, basically, and we can see how the stresses are, or how the deformation is happening inside the bone. So there is also a tool called Anybody, from where you will get the data, like how the forces is varying in these joints, and to understand how much force is coming to each bones, and we can take that data and input in a time variation way. In XY is a time variation way, we can input the forces and see how much stresses, or how the implant is behaving inside. And some kind of results that we can get from these analysis are basically, for example, if you see the first example, this is actually after implant and a person which is doing skiing. So you will be able to get what is the maximum stresses coming on these parts or these bones after implant, right? So these stresses should not cross any limit, because it will cause fracture. So to understand how different models of our implant varies, these stresses are very important. Similarly, when we cut off some parts from the bone in order to keep the implant inside securely, we have to test what is the stresses coming on that contact area also, right? Because if the stresses are more in this area, the pain for this patient will be also more. So we have to take in consideration of that also, how this implant will be seated into the bone. So next kind of results that we can look for is for the implant itself. So the main issue with the implant is the life of the implant. So you can see the maximum stresses coming on the implants. Here the maximum stress coming is 433 on this small portion, where the cross section of this part is less, and obviously here due to stress concentration, the stress will be maximum. But for one time it might survive. We will getting 433, maybe the yield point or the material itself will not break for maybe 600 MP or something, but it's for one time. What it happens for multiple times, the person doesn't use this for one time, right? He want to use it for different cycles, different time, maybe 10 years or 20 years. Will it survive for some time, that much time? So getting this data, we can actually do a fatigue analysis and to understand how many cycles or how many life will this product will have. Similarly, the contact pressure. So contact pressure between our implant and the other part or the bone area. So this is also very important, because the contact pressure should be uniform throughout, and the motion. So the contact pressure should be uniform throughout. Then only the motion will be smooth enough. Otherwise, you can also say that the contact at any particular point is high. That means it is a high probability that the pain will be causing due to that particular motion. And it also creates wear. If the contact pressure in some area, localized area, is more, then it also causes a wear. The next area which we should also should be looking for is the sliding distance. Sliding distance is nothing but when you keep the implant into the bone, the while the implant should not move by a large distance with respect to the bone, right? So if the sliding is more, that means it will take considerable amount of time in order to recover. because the bone should reconstruct around the implant and have a good adhesion between the implant and the bone, right? So if there is a huge sliding distance, if it is sliding interference between the bone and the implant is more, that means the recovery time for the patient is also more, and it's also painful in that case. Similarly, if you see the geometry of this implant keeping inside the bone, the contact pressure, how well it is being maintained boundaries between the bone and the implant, it should also be noted, because if the contact pressure between the bone and the implant is less, that means it is easy to move. It is not withholding very rigidly. So the sliding distance will increase. At the same time, if you increase the pressure by increasing the geometry of the implant or something, if the contact pressure is increasing, that means there is a chance for creating micro fractures, and which will further cause more pain, and the situation will be very bad. So it should be considerable enough within the range, so that the sliding distance and the pressure between the interface between the bone and the implant should be within the limit. So these kind of things we can see and understand through simulation. Coming to next part, next joint is knee joint. So basically, the knee joint is special due to its motion, basically, and it's a little complex. Majorly, it should work for different ankles, right? That is a specialty that comes within the knee joint. It should work well for different ankles. At the same time, it should take considerable amount of load also. And the pain created between the joints when the load comes and the when the implant or hitting the bone, that joint is very crucial, because that creates a pain for the patient. So by simulation, you can actually look for the contact stress. So what is contact stress around that joint, so that you can understand if the stresses are more, that means wear will be more and the pain will be more for the person, right? This is an example done by Johnson & Johnson in order to understand how the motion will be carried when for different angles, and how the load will be transferred for the bottom part. Similarly, for spine also, it's very complex, because it consists of different kind of vertebrae, then disc. So the movement itself is complex in that sense. So you can do different kind of simulation for a cement injection, or after keeping the implant, how well the implant will be fixed, what will be the life of the implant, what will be sliding distance. All those kind of data you can actually analyze. You can also see how these screws, what will be the tension between them, will it be too much or less in order to hold this stress tension between the disc. These kind of things you can understand through simulation, basically. Also, in order to design the seats also, for specific kind of persons or patients, in order to keep the spine straight or in their specific model optimized way. Now coming into the shoulder joint, so shoulder joint is also one of the important or challenging one, because of its large motion, right? It's almost, you can say, it's almost 360 degrees. And the challenges faced by shoulder arthroplasty are majorly because of the failure of glenoid implants, basically, right? So the wear between the glenoid implants, or how the structural integrity of these glenoid implant, different materials. So these have to be considered in order to understand how these implants are failing, right? So ANSYS can help you in order to understand how different prosthetics angle, or which angle will be more suitable for a specific person, and what kind of in different motion, what will be the data, what will be the sliding distance. For example, if you see here, this is actually the sliding distance when you keep the humor part inside, implant inside the humor bone. And this is actually the glenoid implant, which is being sliding distance, and the stresses, you can see the stresses and strains which is caused by the glenoid when it is being attached to the scapular part of the shoulder. So how you can basically do this in work in ANSYS is basically, uh, first you need to have the geometry, which you can actually get in a format of STL by scanning. And you need to mesh the body. Meshing is nothing but you are discretizing the body. Um, suppose say the stick is here. If I'm fixing the stick here, right, and I'm applying a force and getting the data, I'm keeping a sensor here, and I'm keeping a sensor here also. This bends, and I have only two data, right? One data here and second data here. So I can have only one data that is like this. But if I want to get all the data in between, you need different sensors here, right? At all these points, if you have different sensors, then you can get the actual deformation. Yeah, this is how it deforms rather than a straight line. Similarly, we are discretizing um, the stick. Similarly, we are discretizing the parts from CAD geometry. We are discretizing this body in order to get different data from every location. That is meant by meshing, actually. Then we will give the boundary condition. Suppose say we want to see how this ball and socket part is moving by a degree of 10 degree or something like that. We can give different boundary conditions like fixing here and moving this humor part of the shoulder. And then the last part comes as a result. You will be able to see how it's actually deforming, what will be the force and moment being created, what will be the contact pressure, where, all those kind of results you will get. Then if you want to optimize your implants, there is also steps for optimization. You'll be able to see which parameters is causing your output. Suppose say you want to try out for different parameters, different thickness, different dimensions. You can just mention that this is a parameter for this. I want to try out 4 or 5 dimensions, and through the single workflow, the ANSYS simulation will be doing 3 simulations. You don't have to interfere. Automatically, all the 4 parameters will be checked, and you'll be able to get the output result for all the parameters. Now, coming into multidisciplinary study or multiphysics study. So basically, earlier all the previously mentioned case are, we only mentioned about the structural part, how the stresses or how it is deforming, contact part. So we only mentioned the structural part or structural integrity of our model, right? But in human body, it's not only about one physics. There is a lot of fluids. Basically, fluid is the most percentage, right? So interaction between the fluid and the structure is also very important to understand how parts will work. So taking one example of shoulder itself, shoulder arthroplastics. So what the actual motivation behind this is, considering the glenoid implant, glenoid part. As you can see here, this part is actually most of the time it's being used as a polyethylene, which is having a very low coefficient of friction, which is suitable for these conditions. At the same time, it should be strong enough, right? But still it fails. It fails in most of this is the one of the most common problem faced by um, companies. So in order to understand this, we have to understand what is the friction coming over here, how well the lubrication is happening, right? Because in the actual condition, there will be a synovial fluid which takes part between these two bones, right? So ideally, if you take any joints like hip joint or knee joint, there will be a synovial cavity which which makes a friction or contact frictionless itself. There won't be any friction because of the lubrication, well lubrication. So in order to understand all those kind of things, how the mechanism is actually working, you have to consider the fluid part also. So if you are considering the fluid part also, how it's interacting with the with the structures, interacting with the structures, you will be able to study how, where is a high pressure region, low pressure region. Understanding that, you will be able to see how efficiently the fluid will be moving, and thereby how lubrication is happening, right? So this is the main reason why you should be going for multidisciplinary or multi-physics simulations. So actually, a shoulder osteoblast can be total. In the left side, it's a total, and the right side we can also consider as a reverse shoulder osteoblast also, right? So here the main thing is just taking the glenoid as a spherical side and the flat part as a humer part. So here in this problem, actually what we are considering is the right side, and here we are actually creating a region, a fluid region, or the one that you see as a box. The box region is actually a synovial cavity where we are modeling the synovial fluid, so that we are modeling both structure part and fluid, and doing the simulation at the same time to see how it's interacting between these two. So in this example, we are considering actually two kind of geometries or two kind of designs, basically. So one design is like the upper part, here it's considerably flat, and the glenoid is actually moving in 11 and 5 degree rotation for over 1 second. And the second condition is like it's kind of a cup, where it's more of a curved surface, which is conventional design. And similarly here also, it's for 1 second it is being rotation for 20 degree up and down. So this is how actually the workflow for inside ANSYS it looks like, basically. So and it's also very easy inside ANSYS to consider multi-physics simulations also. The main problem which comes in the multi-physics is, suppose say you created a fluid domain, you did a fluid analysis with the synovial cavity, and you did the study. You have the fluid data, right? Then coming into structure part, your model is all solid, but you want to map the pressures to the structure part. So the mapping between the result between different physics is something that misses in other simulation tools, but it's very easy in ANSYS. It's just drag and drop. You can just basically connect them so that the results will be carry forward. Results are connected basically between the two physics. So coming into main workflow, you can actually model different geometries inside the space claim. So basically, we have two space claim inside ANSYS in order to handle these different kind of geometries. Then inside fluent or the fluid part, you can mesh the body, mesh the fluid part. So only the fluid structures, fluid part like that is a synovial fluid will be meshed by giving a appropriate fluid material property, right? The viscosity or density, all those properties are being mentioned here. Similarly, for the engineering data, similarly for the data of a bone or the our implant data, polyethylene or titanium, whatever the material data we have to provide, we provide the structural part also. Similarly, boundary conditions of in the structures. So in our case, it is moving up and down, and here it's fixed part, having some degrees of rotations, right? And it is being done in a time variation way that is we can actually see with respect to time. So what happens here is when this part is moving, it changes the fluid dynamics itself. The pressure changes inside. So due to the fluid pressure also activates on the structure part, structure surface. that also causes some deformation in the structure part. So a continuous communication is being done between the fluid and structure. So that system coupling can be used for the continuous communication between them. So here, what kind of results we can see is basically the pressure distribution and the velocity profile over the surface of glenoid. From this, we can actually interpret what will be, how well basically um, it's lubricated, how the dynamics, fluid dynamics of the synovial fluid. Here you can see a high pressure regions around the glenoid surface. At the same time, there is a small low pressure region also. So from the velocity profile also, you will be able to see how the fluid is moving from a high pressure region to low pressure region, how it is moving, which brings a interpretation that the fluid is moving into the part, into the middle part of this, which shows a little bit of a lubrication. In the second problem, in the second kind of analysis here, we have actually changed the materials to polyethylene and titanium. Before we consider only the metal part. So actually what happens when we change the material itself, right? You want to see the actual conditions. So changing the conditions with polyethylene and titanium material. So you can see same boundary conditions, same conditions, but at the same time, the pressure variation is little different here, right? This is actually due to the deformation or the pressure that causes some small oscillations so inside the solid bodies. That is why you can also see similarly in the velocity profile also small changes. So when as the polyethylene is comparatively flexible, small oscillation of these solid parts are also happening. So with respect to our new design or the second design, where this is a conventional design usually used. So here you can see a very good profile of pressure variation, right? No peak of high pressure or low pressure. It's a very good pressure variation basically. So it means that there is a good flow of synovial fluid. The velocity contour also explain the same thing, because of what there is almost a constant velocity happening between the region, the contact region, which means that it is well lubricated also. So in the same simulation, we can also see the structural part also. Till now, we saw how the fluid is interacting with or the fluid domain results, right? Of the pressure and velocity of the synovial fluid over the surface of the glenoid. Here you can also see the deformation or the stresses that is being created due to this motion for these implants basically. So in the left part you can actually see how glenoid is actually deforming when you having a motion of 5 to 20 degree rotation. At the same time, in the humor part where the stresses are being created where you attach this part to the bone, these are the stress peaking part which should be within the limit, right? So then you can also actually see how the movement or the stresses that is created due to the movement or sliding or frictional stresses being created on the glenoid and the humor part due to the deformation or due to the movement happening. Now, one more important kind of an research that people look for is the contact gap, which is basically how well the contact is taking place. So, if contact gap gives you a better explanation or better understanding of the lubrication, at the same time where the contact area is very less means the pressure will be more, and the wear that can happen will be also very more, right? If the contact point is very less, that means it will get very easily scratched or it very get easily wear also. So considering into material properties, force or the contact pressure comes, we can actually design our materials or the implants accordingly. So actually, from the summary of this experiment that we have done is basically we are able to actually understand the synovial fluid dynamics, how it's interacting with between the parts, or how actually the shoulder joint is actually working, considering every element, right? Then we were able to understand which are the low pressure region and the high pressure region, which gives an insight on how the synovial fluid is moving inside the region, which creates a better lubrication for the joints, right? Then we also able to understand by selecting different materials how it actually changes the behavior, right? For different materials, how the fluid behavior is changing, how the interaction or how the deformation is happening, contact pressure is changing, all those kind of things you can able to see. So with respect to that, there is additional things also you can able to see with respect to implants, basically, right? So whenever you are going for some MRI scans, there will be some limitation. People with pacemakers can't be, or with metal. Uh, there is a limitation for people in order to go for MRI scanning also, right? So you can actually simulate that also, um, um, in order to understand how it reacts. Actually, we have a seminar in the coming days in order to understand how the electromagnetic waves will interact with these pacemakers or other parts, to understand more. That will be discussed in the coming days. So you can attend that seminar also in order to understand in much better way. So here actually, when you go for an MRI scan with these implants, basically what happens, the temperature rises because of the electromagnetic interactions, right? So you should be considerable enough in order to include that temperature variations also when you make these implants. The temperature variation should be within our limit. It should not get too hot, so that it should not damage any tissues around the implant, right? So if you see the simulation which happened for a 15 minutes of MRI analysis, the implant only got an increase in temperature of 0.5 degrees Celsius, which was considerable safe, right? But at the same time, if the temperature is getting raised by 2 degrees Celsius or 3, it is alarming, right? Because it will when the temperature is increasing, the tissues around these implants will get damaged, and it will create a lot of difficulties for the patient also. So in order to consider these things, you can actually optimize your product. For example, here if you see the implant, for different length, the temperature change will be different. Basically what happens is, due to electromagnetic wave, the length also plays a very important role by how much degrees of temperature it will vary. So suppose say I am taking it implant which is having a 30 millimeter length, the temperature will come around 23.4 or something like that, right? If I'm considering the implant as a smaller one, maybe 10 millimeter, it is considerable in a small temperature rise region. So my concern area is 30 to 80. Different length, we can do a study for different length of this implant, and we can see actually how the temperature is changing. So you, from this chart itself, you will be able to understand if my implant is between 30 to 80 millimeter, it is a concerned area. I should not go for this design. I should either go for greater than 80 millimeter or less than 30 millimeter, right? So these kind of optimization can be done in order to design different kind of implants. Then another kind of analysis that we can also do for these kind of situations is a drop test, right? What it means is actually, these implants are one thing, it's very costly. It's made for specific person, and it should be very sterile. And the transportation part is also very important, as with one fold or coming this um, coming this our part coming out of this package will make it, we cannot use it again because sterile concept is also gone. So in order to understand and design very well a packaging of these implants can also be simulated inside ANSYS basically. So you can actually see how a drop test can be done, and yeah, and see how it's actually the waste is being absorbed by the package nearby, so that our product will be safe enough. And you can also see how the stresses is creating on the package all around, so that you can design your package in such a way that your implant is not affected even if you drop with a considerable distance or something like that. So even packaging is a very important area where simulation plays a very important role, right? Yeah, so with this my topic will be over. So if you have any questions, you can ask, please.